Right then, welcome back to part, whatever this is, of how to rebuild Manchester United, how to get us back to our best. And one area that I think really has needed a lot of work, a lot of thought, is sports science, medicine, and injury prevention, because that's absolutely decimated United in the past few years. So, to have our best players on the pitch, continually performing at peak, we've got to have elite sports science, we've got to have elite medical operation, and we've got to make sure that injuries and fatigue are not affecting our performances in derailing seasons. So what we need to do is implement a best-in-class practice from around the world. Start looking at other sports, start looking at those who lead in football, but look at other sports. The UFC, that's a seriously impacted sport when it comes to injuries. How are they managing it? What's going on at the Performance Institute out there? What are the NBA doing, the NFL doing, the different Olympic programs across the world, and ensuring that the squad's fitness and longevity is thought about, looked after. The vision has to be to make United's training ground an absolute laboratory where science and sport are blended together seamlessly. Now, in the 2000s, AC Milan set the gold standard with the Milan Lab, which takes a holistic look at data-driven approach to health. Under Jean-Pierre Meersman, the Milan Lab integrated neurology, biomechanics, psychology, and cutting-edge medical screening to predict and prevent injuries. And the results were astounding. In his first season, Milan reported 43% fewer training day lost to injury, 70% less medication usage, and player injuries dropped by over 2/3. Think about the impact of that. Think about how decimated Manchester United's seasons have been recently. And if we could take injuries down by 2/3, that can literally be the difference between coming 8th and qualifying for the Champions League. And that is genuinely impactful. It's a joke that people haven't implemented this kind of strategy on a bigger, more industrial level. The same with the stuff with the academy. Think about where all of our wastage goes when it comes to transfers. And look at Mason Mount's transfer last season. £60 million, basically didn't play. Manchester United might as well have set fire to £60 million in used 20s, because that's how much we got out of having Mason Mount. And it's probably not going to be any resale value associated with him, even if he does end up playing from next season onwards. So United might as well have literally just set fire to £60 million. Now, you can't sustain that. And then obviously the players, even if they're successful players, getting injured and not being available to you is a waste of all of the transfer fees that you've had. Now, the likes of Paolo Maldini and Seedorf had their careers extended into their late 30s at the top level, which might have been a testament to what we saw with the Milan Lab. That's something that you can't really put a price on. What if you get an extra 7 or 8 years out of Bruno Fernandes from where he is now because of the technology and the science that you implement at the training ground? That's literally saving you a fortune. You know, we can recreate a Milan-style lab at United, but with even more modern science and technology. You know, constant monitoring of player health markers, regular orthopedic screenings, muscular strength development, flexibility tests, even dental and vision checks, which I know that there's a lot of that stuff going on, and Manchester United were one of the leaders when it came to dental health and the impact that that can have on footballers, which is actually massive. But even things like, you know, I wear a Whoop. Cristiano Ronaldo is an ambassador for Whoop at the moment, and he's the perfect ambassador for Whoop to have. And I can imagine he's ridiculously anal when it comes to checking it. But things like your sleep and your HRV status and your resting heart rate and the strain that you're putting out each day, having something like this, forget about a GPS tracker that sees the workload that you're putting in. That literally just sees the sprints that you're putting in and the relative effort that you're putting in during that training session. You wear a Whoop in the fucking shower. You wear a Whoop to sleep. It's on you 24/7. Do you know how you charge it? You charge it by putting this over the top. This isn't an advert for them, by the way, right? That's how you charge it. You never take it off. You'll end up with weird-looking skin underneath your wrist after a while, because man's got used to it now. I'm like 4 years deep with this thing. I believe in it. Cristiano Ronaldo believes in it. But it's things like that, implementing that. As soon as you get to under 18s, Lads, you're wearing this now 24/7. It's in your contract that you're going to wear this. And we'll have somewhere that we can look at this data and analyze it. I will know that I'm getting sick because of my whoop before I actually show symptoms of getting sick because my HRV status drops. Those sorts of things are vitally important. When we're thinking about, can we have 25 athletes at the peak of their condition, ready to go twice a week, and you're not doing stuff like that, you're leaving so much guesswork into how you're going to perform on a week-to-week basis. It's ridiculous. But there's even things like your blood test. You can do all sorts of things like that. You know, the force plates, different preventative medicine, catching issues before they fully develop. And that's before we even get into the exciting development of artificial intelligence in injury prediction. Now, I'm certainly no expert on this in the slightest, and I'm as much confused out of everyone. But you can use platforms like Zone 7, which is an AI-based system which will analyze player data, training loads, sleep, soreness, that will flag heightened injury risk. Liverpool adopted it in 2021, and it was credited with helping them navigate that quadruple chase that they went on with relatively few injuries. Oh, haven't Liverpool been lucky with the injuries that they get? Or have they been using AI to try and game the system a little bit and actually get in front of and ahead of everybody? You know, they had good results and they extended it to both their women's and their under-23 teams. AI can detect patterns. Maybe a player's sprint speed dropped by 5%. Combine that with the high loads that he's had over the last 5 days, maybe there's a hamstring issue brewing. They alert someone to intervene and you rest that player or you modify their training. Fantastic. Yeah, fantastic. And that's what Manchester United should be standing for. The absolute forefront of technology, data, wearables, AI, you know, all come into a predictive model that can say, this is what's about to happen. If a Silicon Valley algorithm can tell you that there's a 70% chance a player's going to get injured in the next week unless you modify his training, then you'd modify his training, wouldn't you? Rather than just being like, lads aren't putting out enough. It's nonsense. On recovery, top performance isn't just about avoiding injury. It's also about optimizing the recovery so players can sustain high level throughout a long season and long travel. This is where the best of the likes of the NBA come in. They have an 82-game season, and I don't really watch a lot of basketball, but I can appreciate the force that's going through not small fellas' knees and ankles, with the agility that's required and the speed that's required and the conditioning that's required to put out for an 82-game season where there's a hell of a lot of seriously long-distance travel involved as well. NBA teams are recovery experts. They have in-depth research on sleep science. They put a huge emphasis on the sleep quality of their players. They have got black belts in naps. You know, you bring in a sleep consultant, someone that's worked at somewhere like an NBA club, and you partner with a sleep lab and you educate and implement plans with the players on the benefits of proper sleep and things like, you know, sleep is a performance-enhancing drug, man. Golden State Warriors, Andre Iguodala, doubled his 3-point percentage and significantly cut out turnovers because he improved his sleep to 8 hours. Well-rested athletes make better decisions and they perform better. And for United, that could mean a striker that's more clinical or a midfielder who's able to find more passes more frequently, more often, more regularly. You ensure players have personalised sleep routines because what I need might not be what that guy needs. But as long as that player's getting what they need and it's monitored and tracked, you can easily do it. You manage the travel and the schedule in a way that minimises jet lag. That was one of the things that annoyed me with United's pre-season, starting off on the East Coast and gradually moving further and further west before coming all the way back to Europe, where the jet lag's going to be the maximum impact, rather than doing the opposite, like starting in Los Angeles, coming back over as quick as you can and finishing up with a good few days. Like, it takes 1 hour per day to correct. So if you go somewhere that's 8 hours, you're looking at 8 days for you to get your sleep rhythm back. It's mental. So at most, you want to be a week away somewhere on the East Coast where it's only 5 hours, because then at least by the time you recover, you are more aligned to local time. And nutrition is another pillar. You've got to maintain individualized nutrition plans, on-site chefs providing the right balance of carbs for energy, protein for recovery, and you integrate that with, anti-inflammatory diets that can help aid recovery. You have recovery facilities at Carrington that are completely state-of-the-art. Cryotherapy chambers. We know Cristiano Ronaldo famously has one at home. Is there one at Carrington? If not, why not? If there's one down the road in Didsbury that I can go and pay £4 and use, why is there not one at Carrington? Why are we not seeing constant pictures of the lads taking a piss out of each other with the little shower caps and gloves on all the time? Leicester's miracle 2016 title win was supposedly aided by regular cryotherapy sessions, hydrotherapy pools, compression boots, massages. Cryotherapy helps reduce inflammation and speeds up muscle recovery. It's a fact. Many clubs do have cryo chambers on site. If we don't, why don't we? Players have an intense session or a training match or even a match, bang them in. I know that they've got them plunge pools in the changing room at Old Trafford, but why not a big cryotherapy pod? Sports science staff should also have things like the contrast bath, foam rolling sessions, and even yoga and stretching classes for flexibility, but also mental relaxation, because burnout is real. One of my mates, Brendan Loughnane, MMA fighter, he trains as hard as I think a human being is possible to train. Guy puts in 5-6 hours. He's at the track, he's doing wrestling, he's hitting mitts, he's hitting pads. Every day he finishes with a hot yoga session. And he says the hot yoga session isn't a training session. He goes, it's a mental session. He goes, it's just for him and his mind. He puts out like no one I've ever seen. Guy gets his resting heart rate into the 30s during training camp. That's basically dead. That's like one heartbeat every 2 seconds. Think about that. And he uses hot yoga like 8-9 o'clock every single night. And he says that's for his mind. And he ain't burnt out. And he's been, professional MMA fighter for nigh on 20 years. Every player will have an optimal workload range. Too little, and they're not getting enough stimulus to keep developing. Too much, you'll push them over the edge and they'll get injured. Yes, you should be using the GPS stuff, but yes, you should be using wearables that track them 24/7, heart rate monitors in every training session to really get accurate data, because this isn't perfect. Sports scientists should produce a bit of a daily dashboard where coaches can see who's redlining, who's fresh, which players are having certain mental loads, and even like sitting them down with a psychologist who gives them a bit of a score out of 10 as well on like, yeah, he's fine, or I think he's getting a little bit close to the edge. That sort of sports science is common practice at top clubs, and I know from chatting to Rio sometimes that was something that United were doing at our peak, and I would imagine are still sort of doing, where you would have sports science stood at the side of the pitch and be like, he's run too much, take him off. And Rio said he used to complain about, like, they'd come to you when you're in the middle of those 11v11s at Carrington and they'd be like, you need to come off. And he's like, I feel fucking fine. I think that's a good thing overall. There shouldn't be blind running players into the ground. You can tailor your training drills by position that mimic the game demands, because those are different. In a Ruben Amorim system, the wing-backs are going to be asked to do a hell of a lot more than your centre-halves and even your strikers. And your load management, obviously that's a term that's been popularised lately. Sits out people in low-importance games, substitutes the likes of Bruno Fernandes early in games. Now, we've not really had the luxury of being 2 goals ahead in many games where we can do that. But, when you've got a congested fixture schedule, you might have to say, you're not playing this League Cup game against Burton Albion tonight. You're just not. Once the results are secure, rather than having them play a full 90, get them off at 60, 70 minutes. Those sort of marginal gains can really make a big difference when it gets to April and May and you're pushing for trophies and titles. But there's also new technologies. Do you know they can do saliva tests that give immediate markers for fatigue because of cortisol and creatine levels that get secreted into your saliva? Some teams are using questionnaires. Players will rate their fatigue and muscle soreness each morning. The problem with that is some players, I can imagine, like a Bruno, will just lie and say, I feel fine. But combine some psychology with objective measures, catching people that are overly fatigued. The mantra then has to be, don't prioritize the short term and start looking at long-term availability. When players start showing signs of an injury risk, have the bollocks to rest them or to modify their training and trust in the depth of the squad to cope, which obviously we're not really in a position to do at the moment. And then start borrowing some other stuff. American football is absolutely brutal on the body. Yes, the seasons are short, but Christ, it's like being in a train crash every week. They've got some pretty advanced protocols when it comes to rehab and conditioning. Learn from them, especially when it comes to the strength and conditioning. A robust strength program can literally elevate how well players can do, getting them good and strong and balanced. And I do like watching strength and conditioning videos that clubs put out. Some of them are really bad, some of them are fantastic, but you got to ensure that the gym work is absolutely top notch. Bring in consultants from those really robust sports, NFL, rugby league, people that have got experience in developing power athletes. That's what Mick Clegg was at Manchester United for when we were on the top of the world. British cycling famously sought those 1% improvements, which Brailsford was involved in, whether it's bike ergonomics, athlete sleep, nutrition, and nutrition timing, collectively adds up to a big advantage. At United, those marginal gains might mean using slightly different training for each player's body. It might mean modifying our training. Famously, football teams train at 10 a.m. When do we ever play at 10 a.m.? Have you ever noticed that the very best UFC athletes and boxers move their training camp times to whatever time they're going to be ring walking? Why do they do that? Because they're getting their body used to being able to output at the time that they're going to be required to play. If you're training at 10 a.m. every single day and your hard sessions are at 10 a.m. every single day, that means your body's going to start getting primed to output the most at 10 a.m. every single day. And if you're going for naps at 3 and 4 in the afternoon because you've gone turbo in the morning and you're using naps as part of your recovery, then when it comes to a 3 o'clock kickoff, your body's going to be naturally in a slump. Why don't we flip it around and start doing all of our admin tasks, all of our learning in the morning, almost replicating what might happen on a match day? Maybe you go out and you do some activation and some mobility and maybe a little bit of set piece and more cerebral type work. Then you get the lads in, you do a little bit of time looking and talking about tactics, discussing where each person would be, look video analysis sessions and looking at about how this thing might play out against Manchester City next week. Then you eat at the same time that you would eat if you was playing a 3 o'clock match. And then you go for a warm-up again around about 2 o'clock. And then 3 o'clock, you have your hard training session where you really put out and you go maximum and you get their heart rates jacked for long periods of time. And then about 4 or 5 o'clock, they go home. Like on a match day, getting them ready. Now, think about the worst case scenario where you have training is 10 a.m. every single morning. Then Thursday night, you have travel. And then a late kickoff in Europe, 8 o'clock. Body isn't primed to be, now you're in a different time zone and your body's 12 hours out of sync from where it used to want to be able to put out and deliver all its energy. And then you come back and then you're kicking off at 12 o'clock or 5 o'clock. Those constant changing kickoff times are a nightmare. But the one common denominator is they're all in the afternoon. Why are we training at 10 a.m.? Get the body used to adapting and putting out at the right kind of time. And there's so many other things as well. When it comes to marginal gains, that's the sort of thing that might be enough. Altitude simulation tents for players that need those aerobic boosts. Blood flow restriction, which, help with some muscle mass when athletes can't fully train. Consider the impact of neuroscience in training. Exercises that improve reaction time and decision making can be done with neuro training devices and visual training. quarterbacks in the NFL use strobe glasses to enhance their focus. Could use similar with goalkeepers or your playmakers. And despite all of the prevention, despite all of the science, and all of the chicken and broccoli that you can eat, you're still going to get injuries. When you do get injuries, we have to handle rehab with clinical precision and expertise. You need to have a multidisciplinary rehab team in-house. We don't want to be sending people to Barcelona to go and see specialists. You want to have them all at Carrington. Osteopaths, sports doctors, physiotherapists, specialist consultants that can perform operations for the most common things that you see, ACLs, ankles. An aggressive and safe approach. The latest in therapy techniques, whether that's from injections, shockwave therapy, anything that you can. We shouldn't be rushing players back, of course, but use partner clubs and reserves for rehab. Players that come back from 3 months out, they need to probably go and play in the 23s. They need to be playing in-house games behind closed doors before they rejoin first-team football. Ensure that there's performance confidence markers that get hit, reducing the risk of re-injuring, because we see that re-injury risk all the time. And also track injury patterns. If you see a trend, tons of hamstring injuries, tons of ACLs, tons of ankle rolls. Okay, what are we doing wrong? Is there something we can do in a warm-up that's going to change this? Are the players lacking in hamstring strength? Do we need to start incorporating more Nordics into what we do? And yes is always the answer when it comes to Nordics. There needs to be a growth mindset where always learning is what someone says every single day. And it makes everyone laugh because we're always learning. And then mental and emotional well-being. We touched on that when it came to the academy lads. But a healthy mind can lead to a healthy body. And stress and mental fatigue can manifest in physical ways. Higher cortisol can impede recovery. And you have mental wellness programs that help the players adapt to dealing with playing for Manchester United, but also those that are injured, dealing with the likely depression symptoms that are going to come in with being there. For whether it's sports psychologists, which there should be a permanent position of at United, that should not be outsourced. Whether it's mindfulness training, whether it's team building activities, have the players coming in the building happy, fresh. Those players are more resilient and maybe even less prone to certain injuries. And when injuries do occur, mental support for the players so they don't feel isolated. There was Neil Warnock famously didn't want to see injured players because he thought they impacted the rest of the team. Maybe assign them like a rehab buddy to make sure that they still travel with the team when possible. And like I said, sports science needs to have a strong voice. The manager should have regular meetings with the performance team. They should be well aware of the periodization for when to go hard and when it's going to ease off a little bit. They should have training written out in blocks, a little bit like an Olympic cycle, your base phase, your competition phase, looking to try and peak at the right times, maybe even having different players peaking at different times so they can have the responsibility of carrying the team. Arsene Wenger supposedly did something like this at Arsenal, tailoring the training load so he could try and peak in March and May. So Alex Ferguson always wanted his players ready to start pre-season. Didn't want them ready to go at the start of the season, wanted them just to be ready enough to start at the start of the season, and then he would have a little bit of a fitness refresher when it came to Christmas. When Jose Mourinho came in, he had to change his ways and he had to start the season a little bit faster than he normally would have done. The game is constantly changing in that sense. But by adopting the best technology, the best science, and the mindset of growth and trying to look for those areas where 1% difference can be made, I think the players start to notice the difference. They feel taken care of. They feel that their careers are going to be extended. And you might even prolong the careers of some of those older players. The kind of approach that allowed Ryan Giggs to play until his 40s. The bottom line is, a fit, fresh squad requires less players. A fit, fresh squad that's mentally robust means that you don't waste money on players that are going to sit on the sidelines injured all season. Look at the amount of... Luke Shaw and Bruno Fernandes have played the same amount of games for Manchester United, and one of them's been here 6 years longer than the other. It's insane. Same with Anthony Martial, same with Mason Mount. Players like that have just been allowed to be injured. Correct screening to make sure you're not signing injury-prone players. Correct rehab to make sure that those that get injured don't get re-injured. And a growth mindset to ensure that we are making sure that players are fit and strong enough for the demands of Premier League and hopefully Champions League football. There you go. Next episode, we are going to look at the cultural and leadership development and what the Manchester United DNA should be. It's not just about tactics and talent. See you in the next one. Laters. Hey, thank you for watching the video. If you are new around these parts, then don't forget to subscribe. My channel is proudly supported by my community on Patreon. If you'd like to get a little bit of extra content, a Discord group, meetups, five-a-side games, weekly podcasts, behind the scenes, and even an occasional bit of transfer news as and when I get it, then for the price of a pint, you can show your appreciation for the content that we make and get some goodies for doing so as well. Check the link in the description or click the button right here. You'll also find all of my socials here too if you want to follow me on any of those platforms. Nice one.